Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the webinar, Demystifying Business Setup in the UAE. Our topic today focuses mostly on how you can do a market entry inside the UAE by use of a legal entity. By legal entity, we mean any type of company or licensing that you require to do business legally inside the UAE. So our presentation is going to provide a generic approach that applies to almost 99% of the businesses and how we can navigate this landscape. With me this evening is Allistar. So Allistar is an experienced business setup advisor and entity manager who is working currently with SETHUB Hub, a part of the Creative Zone group. So he speaks these questions, answers these questions, and directs the way in his daily life as part of corporate. Myself, Lloyd, would be your moderator for tonight. I am also an experienced, seasoned entity management and legal compliance executive, having more than 10 years in the UAE, managing the governance, risk, and compliance landscape. So, good evening. As part of our housekeeping rules, we encourage you to put your questions through the chat box for all the questions that you might have along the way of the presentation. Then we can address them later after Alisa gives the first presentation. That's maybe probably within the next 20 minutes. So we encourage you all to put any thoughts, any questions that you have, anything in any language, be it English or in Shona, so that we can understand each other better. Thank you.
Debele as well.
Exactly.
All
Sure.
right, cool. Thank you so much, Lloyd, for the wonderful introduction. And thank you, everybody that's joined in so far. We've got, I think, about 21 people online, which is great. That's so amazing. And I'm sure that there's a couple of people that are going to come through. So thank you again, everyone. Welcome to Demystifying Business Setup in the UAE. So this is going to be a very, not generic as such, but just for the basics. So as Lloyd mentioned, that there's going to be a Q&A later on. If you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat and then we can tackle them a little later. But we'll just give you an overall and try and make it as quick as possible to make it time for Q&A. So just demystifying business setup, right? What the Zimbabwean entrepreneur and company needs to know to enter into the UAE market. So if it hasn't been obvious, this is going to be specific to Zimbabwean entrepreneurs and companies, but these rules apply to anyone that wants to get into the UAE market and start up their business. All right. So just to also remind you that my name is Allistar. I work for SETHUB, that is under the Creative Zone group. And this is in conjunction with the Zimbabwean Business Council, which SETHUB is actually a corporate member of. Right. So as a corporate member of basically I wouldn't say authority, but I can't say agent either. Generally, the people that help you out with making sure that your business thrives in the UAE with Zimbabwean assistance as well. Right. So I'm a business strategist and consultant here in the UAE. I've been doing this for some time. And I'm just here passionate about people from my home country coming to start up businesses in the UAE, whether it's carrying on their business from Zimbabwe and replicating and duplicating and expanding it in the UAE, or just starting something totally different and completely new entirely. So now the question is always, why the UAE? So that's always the first question. And your curiosity is obvious in being here that you want to know why. Like for a lot of people, they either have businesses already or they don't, and they want to start something completely new. And for a lot of people, sometimes it might be daunting to start a business in Zimbabwe, and they just want to see if it's better to do it here or just gauge and weigh their options. So this here is going to give you a guide to three things in general. Number one, 100% foreign ownership, which is something I'm sure a lot of people don't know. Tax advantages, which I will touch in brief, as well as global market access with the unique and strategic location of the UAE in and of itself, especially the mega city known as Dubai, right? Now, expanding beyond borders, right? Unlocking the UAE opportunities. So this is more of not just tapping into a better or into a more lucrative environment, but it's also about the opportunities underlying just being in the UAE, not necessarily having your business running. Okay, so I'm going to give you a few of those as well, and just generally let you in on what you can take away from this entire presentation, aside from just business setup, which is going to be the main focus, but a lot of other things that you might also find interesting. Okay, so just to start off, the UAE and Zimbabwe's relationship is growing and it's expanding each and every year. So this statistic is from Bloomberg, where it's showing that year on year exports from Zimbabwe into the UAE have grown. Most of it is actually in the realm of food, but there's also things like commodities, precious stones, etc., as well as just general services, right? We have quite a lot of Zimbabwean-based companies starting and opening up either branches or connections to support their supply chain in the UAE and thereby making their business grow even further. So local markets in Zimbabwe can sometimes stunt that growth, not because there's anything wrong with Zimbabwe, but sometimes you need that level of leverage to go into the international market and have your presence in an international market to tap into other markets as well. The UAE generally is ranked one of the top global business destinations in the world. This is globally, not just in the Middle East or in the GCC, the Gulf countries, right? So Zimbabwean businesses can scale up and do this expansion of their businesses much faster with a global base in order for them to really reach the heights they probably are struggling to reach right now in Zimbabwe, or are just wanting to expand what they already have, which is probably a very big amount of success. So the core advantages of doing business in the UAE, I'll name four of them, right? Number one, foreign ownership. That is 100% of this company. So a lot of people have this perception that if you're going to start a business in the UAE, you kind of have to also have someone from the UAE own it, either someone or an entity that owns parts of your business. That is no longer the case. It used to be, but that is no longer the case now. And 100% ownership is possible. So if you're going to start in the UAE, the only part in which the UAE would probably need to be involved is just in the immigration status. Otherwise, just once you get your immigration status sorted out and the company is in your name, it is 100% yours. So the profits and everything, the shareholding is all according to what you would want it to do. So if you want to be a sole proprietor, or you'd like to partner up with some of your partners from Zimbabwe and it's just you guys, that's perfect. But you also have the option to also involve the locals as well. So this is just up to you, right? But you have the option of foreign ownership. Number two, no currency restrictions. As Zimbabweans, I'm sure that we know what currency restrictions feels like. Okay, so most of us are using either the local currency or the US dollar, right? And sometimes because the US dollar is not typically the currency of Zimbabwe, like nationally, it's sometimes hard to get that. But then when you come and open up here, you have a plethora of currencies, you have easy money coming in, going out. So the restrictions are not as tight as you probably have experienced from Zimbabwe, right? So you have that advantage for your business as well. Number three, zero personal and corporate tax in free zones, but the conditions apply with some of these, right? So tax is a very, very big concern for a lot of businesses around the world because sometimes tax does eat significantly into company profits and overall increases the overheads. So because there's this advantage to the people who work for these companies of zero personal income tax, which that is definitely there, as well as zero corporate tax or limited corporate tax, depending on the condition that needs to apply for that. So there are some certain designated free zones that have this ability to completely erase corporate tax. But just to give you a heads up, corporate tax is mandatory for you to register for it in the UAE. So it really all depends on how you register your company. And then the fourth part is investor-friendly banking options, right? As well as residency. So as Zimbabweans, I know not all of us are not extremely happy with the banking sector right now. There's a lot of talks about what's going to go on, especially with what's happened recently with the currency exchange, the currency changing and everything. So what this does for you is, and that's a picture of the Central Bank of the UAE, by the way, for those that don't know what that picture is. So you have investor friendly. So for a lot of Zimbabweans, what they want to do is pool investments, right? You want to get people from outside of the country to invest and have foreign direct investment come into the country, which is FDI, right? That's something that most of us in business in Zimbabwe know about, right? So because some investment options are not as friendly to go directly into Zimbabwe, you can, I wouldn't say bypass it, but you can channel it through your incorporation in the UAE as well as residency, because a lot of people think you have to stay or live for a long period of time in the UAE to run your business, and that's not the case. There's actually ways in which you can come into the country, maintain your residency, but not necessarily live there. So you have the option of even living and operating from Zimbabwe and living and operating in the UAE concurrently. All right. Now, strategic location and market access. Dubai is like physically in the middle of the world, right? Literally, you can reach to anywhere, especially with the fact that Emirates and Etihad, which are the two biggest airlines of the UAE, are all able to reach as many locations. They're one of the probably the biggest airlines in the world. And with that advantage that they can go anywhere means that you have the possibility of going to and reaching places internationally much faster and much easier. We already have a flight that goes from Harare to the UAE via Zambia, sometimes directly, but that's the thing. It's different when you consider that sometimes for a lot of people, when they need to connect to other places, especially with Zimbabwean passports, it might be slightly difficult. But then this allows you to also have people, not just you going to these markets internationally, but also those international markets coming to the UAE. So this is a short flight that can connect you to almost 2 billion people. It's a gateway to pretty much anywhere in the world, and major logistics hubs such as Jebel Ali, Dubai Airport. There's so many advantages of just the location in and of itself. Then, now just to give you a brief on the type of business setup you can have, right? So this is going to be something I'd need to just try and make as short as possible, but hopefully everybody gets it. So there's two main jurisdictions, all right? These are not the only jurisdictions, but there's two main jurisdictions, which is free zone and mainland. The other third one is offshore, but for the purpose of this presentation, I'm not going to expand much on that. But offshore is also one of the jurisdictions. But free zone and mainland is what the focus will be today, right? So the advantages, or rather not the advantages, the differences between the two are that number one, ownership, both 100% can be 100% foreign owned now. Mainland didn't have this before. I'm sure those that have tried to enter into the UAE before knew that mainland had to have some Emirati ownership as well as part of the mainland company, but this is now allowed. 100% foreign ownership is possible. Now, in terms of costings, this is going to be a very interesting part for us to maneuver. So free zones generally are a lot lower, okay? Free zones in most jurisdictions is a lot lower to set up, right? Not always the case, but that is mostly the case. Now, mainland can be higher because when you're setting up in the mainland, you have to also involve the government in your licensing of the business, okay? So because of that, there may be some fees that you need to pay for to the government directly. So this is kind of their way in how they alleviate the tax requirement. So instead of you paying tax, you're basically going to pay some fees directly to the government for you to operate, right? So they may be higher, but they're a lot more flexible because this is something that you can do on an annual basis. With free zones, which is something I didn't mention in this presentation, I just remembered, you can actually increase the number of year validity of your license. So free zone has that option, but mainland is always on an annual basis. So there is some flexibility there still. Then in terms of scope of operations, you can only operate in a free zone. So I think I just jumped over and went far ahead to explain what a free zone is, first of all, and then explain what mainland is. So a free zone is essentially a jurisdiction in an area where you can register your business and have it operating from there. You will have a virtual address, or what they call, or in some packages, co-working desks or flexi desks, in which you can operate from there, right? So this is mainly for companies that want to register and do business to business, right? B2B transactions. Okay. So this is in the realm of consultants, e-commerce, anything that is kind of a service based, but there are options in which you can do trading as well. It all depends on what it is that you'd want to do. And then with mainland, you need to register and have an actual physical office in the UAE. But in terms of the scope of operation, and this is where it comes together, the free zone requires you to operate within that free zone or internationally. With mainland, you can go anywhere in the UAE. So it's not limited to Dubai, it's not limited to Abu Dhabi or any of the other northern Emirates, and you can also expand globally, right? So you'll notice that there's also big difference with the suffix of the type of company that you're setting up. So with free zone, it's usually FZCO, usually. And then with mainland, it'll be LLC, but we can discuss that much later. And then in terms of visa eligibility, we have multiple options for both of these setups. So you can either have a situation where you have just one visa, and then you can have two visas, or you can have as many visas as possible. Generally, mainland has that flexibility. Free zones do have some limitations, but these can also depend on the kind of free zone that you'd want to set up in. So there's no real disadvantage or advantage between these two. This really all depends on what it is you aim to achieve. So for instance, a free zone is good for an entrepreneur or somebody that works on their own, right, as a consultant, whereas mainland is good for those that want to scale up and do scaling businesses like supply chain, food importation, etc. Right? Oh, and free zone can also work for e-commerce as well. Right? Now, 6 simple steps. I'm going to try and go through them as briefly as possible. The first step is to choose your activity. So again, like I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar, you don't necessarily have to do a business that you are currently running in Zimbabwe, right? You can do anything in the UAE. Actually, I was speaking to someone recently and they said, I want to do something, but I think it's too crazy to do in the UAE. And I said to him, you have absolutely no idea the kinds of business ideas people launch in this area of the world. Like in this part of the world, you can find anything. I've seen businesses that I never thought were possible being done over here simply because of the flexibility of how to set up here. But it all depends on what it is you want to do. So you have to be very, very, very sure of what it is you need to do first and foremost, because you cannot go into this blindly, right? So you have to make sure that you choose your activity first of all. Secondly, pick a jurisdiction. So this also depends on how you'd want your activity to be done. So some activities can be done either in a free zone or a mainland company, or some are best done in free zone, some are best done in mainland. It really just depends on what it is you're trying to achieve. So I'll give you for example, if you want to get into real estate, like if you want to start selling real estate and you want to be a broker, this is best done on the mainland, right? The reason for this is because real estate is a regulated industry here, regulated by a organized, or rather an entity of the government, an arm of the government known as the Real Estate Regulatory Authority, short for RERA. So if you need any government authorities to approve the kind of activity that you're doing in the UAE, most times you'd need to go into the mainland. Okay. Sometimes you can do it in the free zone, but it really just does depend on the kind of activity. So that's why number one, choosing the activity is the most important. Then number three is reserving your trade name. So you'd need to obviously name your company. Okay, you can't just name a company and not have any identity. But at the same time, there are rules in which you'd need to name your company. Okay, so you can't just give your company any name. They have to be something that the UAE itself can approve of. They're not, for instance, offensive. If you're going to be using a certain language, or if you're going to even try and replicate people's names, there's a lot of regulations, or rather rules, that you have to follow when naming your business. I'll give you a very interesting example. Some person tried to name their company, I think something global, and they had to pay an extra 1,000 dirham just so that they can get the word global on their license. So things like that would need for you to also check with whoever it is that you are going to be assisted by. This is it's set up, of course, either me or my colleagues, and then you'd now find out what is the best name to register your name by. By the way, registering your name does not necessarily mean that this is what you can use on your marketing material. It can be, but you can still have a trading as well. Right, and then number four, submit your documents. Obviously, this is going to be something that is required, things like your passport, things like your proof of residence, just the regular requirements that most business people who've already started businesses know about. So this is just to make sure that you are a upstanding citizen in your country, as well as just knowing that you're coming here with a purpose. Okay, they need to make sure that, okay, this person comes also from a background that's clean, etc., etc., and just for formality's sake, and also make payments. So this is definitely something that you need to pay for, and the prices vary according to, number one, sometimes your activity, sometimes the jurisdiction, and sometimes even the visa requirements. Okay. Then number five, get your license and visa or visa. Sometimes people don't need a visa to run a license here. So if you're already in the UAE and you live here, and you already have a visa that's being sponsored by whoever it is, and you want to start a license, there are zero visa options. So you can get your license and start operating. And the shortest I've seen a license being issued from payment until issuance is 2 hours. So if you actually pay, let's say you got in touch with an advisor earlier today at maybe 8 a.m. Zim time, most times by 10 a.m. Zim time, if you pay obviously for the service, you already have your license out. So this is the efficiency as well. It's very different from a lot of places that sometimes take days and even weeks, sometimes months to get out, right? So this also depends on the kind of license that you're looking for. Okay, there are some licenses that do take weeks and sometimes months. It really just depends on the regulations required. But once you get your license and your visa, you now move on to step number 6, which is the post-license and post-visa stage. This is now where you start setting up the ancillary services that are going to help your business to grow. You'd need a corporate bank account, which is also a very big reason as to why a lot of people start their companies here, because the banking industry here is very flexible and very welcoming when it comes to the requirements to open a bank account, as well as how the banks themselves operate. And then there's going to be tax compliance, which is not necessarily paying the tax. Remember, I mentioned at the beginning that there is a corporate tax mandatory registration that is required for most companies. Depending on the designation of where your company is, corporate tax is mandatory. So that corporate tax compliance is definitely required. And the other tax that you may need to also prepare for is value-added tax, which is going to be on the transactions you make. And this is going to be explained by our tax and accounting that we also do have at SETHUB. All right, so I will get into very simple benefits that Zimbabwean owners and businesses can take from setting up in the UAE. So number one, access to stable currency. So as Zimbabweans, we've been riddled with issues with currencies over the years, and this is something even I can attest to myself. And access to something that won't switch up on you overnight is a very big pool when it comes to the benefits of setting up in the UAE. So it's not just the US dollar that is available here, but also the local dirham for the UAE, right? So the dirhams, that's the money that's used in the UAE, and it's a very stable currency. I don't think it's changed ever. Like I probably recently, but I've never experienced a drastic change in the currency that's local in the UAE. Now, secondly, trade facilitation. So remember the fact that Dubai is, I mean, the UAE generally, especially Dubai, is in pretty much the center of the world. There's a lot of trade facilitation that can occur. So I'll give you an example of this. I had a client who needed to basically set up his company here in the UAE, but needed to trade from China to Europe, right? So you can have such entities where you have or such structures where you have the company registered in the UAE, but then your importation and exportation happens around the UAE and doesn't necessarily enter into the country. So there's a lot of ways in which you can make things like this work, right? Number three, it's attractive for things like tech, agriculture, education, logistics, and fintech sectors, which are really big in Zimbabwe as well. And they're much bigger when you scale them up into an international market like the UAE. And that touches everywhere else in the world as well. And then fourth, last but not least, you build trust with international clients via the UAE presence. So a lot of companies around the world, as long as they know that you're incorporated in the UAE, you will have more of a positive perception in how you do business, because the UAE is a very serious business oriented area. So if you have that on your hip, that you're mentioning in your license, you're registered in the UAE, most times that comes off as more positive than most. Then things to ponder on, and this is going to be an interesting section to put out. I think I see a chat that came through. Okay, there's a question that came through, and I'll make sure to answer it. Lloyd, I'm not sure if you can see the chat. Can you see it? You're on pause, by the way. Sorry, mute.
Yes, I can see the question that was put on the chat. Yeah.
Okay, great.
We will address it at the end as well.
Great, thank you. Just wanted to make sure. All right, so things to ponder on. Number one, a lot of people, and I was one person myself. I actually thought that the UAE is just a place where it's a billionaires playground. Everybody's driving a Lamborghini, everybody's driving a Rolls Royce. That is false. That is the most false thing I can tell you right now. There are ordinary people here. There's people that are living ordinary lives, and they are getting by just fine. I would say myself included, but we are a plethora, a mixed bag of people here. It's not just the billionaires and the millionaires, because most of them took maybe 10 to 15 years to build what it is, and they just come here because of the convenience that this place gives. But the convenience is available for everybody. So this is not just for the ultra wealthy, just to give you a heads up. Number two, too expensive. Free zones start from sometimes under 6,000 dirham, which is roughly, that's definitely under 2,000 US dollars for sure. So instead of buying, this is me putting Zim context into this entire presentation, but instead of buying a Honda Fit that you're going to, like try and do rounds in the city to carry passengers and stuff, this might actually be cheaper than buying that Honda Fit, right? Because a Honda Fit might cost, I think, around maybe $5,000 or 4,000, 3,000 maybe at minimum. This is cheaper than that. So if you're thinking about starting a Honda Fit business, this is actually a lot more affordable, right? Number three, another myth is that you can only do business within the UAE. And obviously, I've mentioned that this is false. A lot of people actually set up businesses and deal with those businesses outside of the UAE. The UAE sometimes is just where they register it. Okay. So I have a client from Germany, for instance, who runs his AI business from Germany, but his business is registered here in the UAE. So you definitely have no limit on where you can actually run your business. So definitely not just within the UAE. Last but not least, your business will be shut down if you make a loss. So this is probably one of the only places that I know of in the world. I could be mistaken. There's a lot of places, but I just simply don't know them. But from what I conventionally know, you are not penalized for making a loss in the UAE. For a lot of people, they just want the lifestyle. They just want to stay here, right? They just want to be here and enjoy the convenience and the standard of living that the UAE possesses. And for that, a lot of people don't care if they run their business at a loss, right? Sometimes starting a business is mainly just for the visa purpose, right? Because to a lot of people, this might be more affordable than them actually having to start a fully fledged business and running it. They think, okay, let me run my business from my home country and then start something just to experience the lifestyle in the UAE. That's actually possible, right? So that's just to give you a heads up that not a lot of people know this, that you can actually run a business even at a loss and still be compliant with UAE rules and regulations. And then now some common pitfalls and mistakes that a lot of people do before they do this. And this is just a learning curve for some people who probably ignore the advice of bona fide consultants or just go against them and go with something that they probably feel might be cheaper and better for them to do. So number one is choosing the wrong license type, right? Some advisors or some people do not specialize in this. So I would always advise you to either look for a consultant, somebody that is knowledgeable about the industry and actually advise you. Me being in this case, being the individual to assist you, because a lot of people have made the mistake of starting a license just for the sake of starting a license, but not doing anything with it because they probably chose the wrong activity or the wrong license type. They probably could have been better doing what they did in a free zone as compared to doing it on the mainland. So make sure that you have a discussion on the type of license that it is that you want to get. Number two, banking delays if the structure is unclear. So banks here, if you're opening a corporate bank account, require you to have a business plan. They are not going to guarantee you a bank account just for the fact that you have a UAE licensed business, right? So it's not automatic. You still have to apply for it and you still have to show clear-cut, straightforward business ideas or business plan that has a purpose, so to speak. Like you are saying, okay, I'm starting this business. This is what I aim to do. This is how I aim to get my money. I just need the bank to facilitate for the funds transfers and to just keep my money there safely, right? So you still need to apply for a corporate bank account. And I have seen situations where clients are mistakenly think that having a license automatically opens you up to having an auto bank account, right? So you still have to make sure that what you want to do is compliant with not just the rules of the country, but also the banking system. There's something that they need to run, which is known as compliance, to make sure that not only are you wanting to run a legitimate business, but that you also have a legitimate background, right? So again, you can not only be rejected a bank account based on what you want to do, but even sometimes, your profile as a person, right? So this is just to let you know that banking still needs an additional application for it, and you still need to work towards it. It is not automatic when you have a license. And third, but not last, of course, lack of market research. A lot of people start businesses with absolutely no direction. They just want to come to the UAE. They love the ambiance and they love whatever the UAE is promising them, and they say, okay, let's do this. But then they don't realize that they need to also know the market they're getting into. Do you know the tastes of the people that you're going to be selling to? Do you know where they stay? Have you seen the places that they stay at? Where would you want to locate your service if you want to open in the mainland? Is it next to a mall? Is it next to a road where a lot of people do walk-in traffic? So there's a lot of things to keep in mind, right? Let's see. There we go. So hidden advantages. I'm going to do this very quickly. There's no audits required in many free zones. So this is just to let you know that sometimes it's just a lot easier accounting-wise for you to run your business here. Virtual company incorporation options also exist. So like I said, you can have a company that has a registration virtually and doesn't need a physical presence. You also have the ability to live outside of the UAE and run your business virtually. So for a lot of people, like I said, I debunked it that you don't have to actually stay in the UAE for a long period of time in order to run your business. And then fourth, and obviously not last, no office requirement for certain activities. So sometimes people actually run their businesses here from coffee shops, okay, from home. Like you can do business pretty much from anywhere, but this also is determined from certain activities. Now, in terms of case studies, I'll be very quick with this one. I have two case studies, one specific to just the UAE Zim relations. This you can find on the Herald, one of our publications in Zimbabwe, that shows the UAE emerging as one of Zimbabwe's major export destinations. So if you're thinking of exporting, especially things like food to the UAE, because the UAE does import a bulk of its food, this is one way you can do it by registering your business here and having the supply chain connect from Zimbabwe to the UAE. Secondly, but not last, is Zimbabwe Business Council, which is also the partner of this webinar to begin with. They are championing cross-border growth between Zimbabwe and the UAE. So a lot of the statistics that you saw that I've shown at the beginning, as well as this article from the Herald, this article that's shown in Newsday is a result of those collaborations between Zimbabwe Business Council with the UAE as well as Zimbabwean businesses. All right, so generally, my call to action is this. Get started today. So you can book a free consultation with me or anyone from my team, and we'll get you started. This is something that we do on the house. Our consultations on the first call are free, but then once you've actually decided to go through, obviously there's going to be a fee for that. But this is something that we can also help you out as someone coming through the Zimbabwean Business Council, or even coming directly. We can always sort out some affordable fees for you, right? Then follow our step-by-step guide for Zimbabweans. Like I mentioned, that 6-step guide, all you need to do is just follow that, right? And then start your UAE business journey with clarity and confidence. All right, so this is pretty much where I end my webinar. I didn't want to go too much over time. Lloyd, are we still good on time?
Yes, we are still on time.
Okay, perfect. All right, great. So I don't know, Lloyd, would you want to read the questions for me, or do you want me to do it?
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Allistar, for the presentation. Very insightful. So now we are moving on to the question and answer segment. Yeah. So the first question that came through was, what is the difference between IFZA and Maidan Free Zone?
All right, so IFZA and Maidan are two free zone jurisdictions located in Dubai, right? So IFZA, which stands for the International Free Zone Authority, is basically located, and they do cooperation for Dubai Silicon Oasis, which is also in and of itself a free zone, right? So the only difference really is the ownership, to be honest with you. The only difference is that IFZA is privately owned, whereas Maidan is owned by the royal sheikh himself, right? So you have the option between the two. They offer different things as well. Some activities are available in one free zone, some are not. So again, there's over 50, if not over 60 different free zones scattered across the UAE. So you're not limited to just one option. But Maidan personally is one of my favorite free zones because their processes are a lot clearer. It definitely is at a premium price, but the premium price has a purpose, right? It's very clean, transparent. That what I mentioned to you in terms of the fastest license that could have been gotten in 2 hours is from Maidan, right? So that's pretty much the difference. But honestly, it really is up to you where you'd want to get your license from. But yeah, there are two different free zones, just all located in the same city.
Okay, thank you. We move on to the second question. Are there any options for intermediary ownership to allow for distancing owners from entities owned internationally?
All right, so options for intermediary ownership to allow for distancing owners from entities owned internationally. Yes, there are, right? So this really now depends on how you'd want to do it. Favorite method for doing this is establishing what is known as a holding company, okay? So a holding company can be set in a different jurisdiction here. We have lots of jurisdictions that also set up holding companies separately. So what they can do is set up the holding company, and that holding company becomes a corporate shareholder of whatever company you set, whether it's free zone or mainland. So holding companies are kind of termed offshore, so to speak, right? But it really just depends on what it is that you want to use this holding company. So in this case, intermediary ownership to distance the owners from entities is mainly done through the holding company structures. One big favorite from a lot of my clients is that of setting up from what is known as rack ICC, right? So you can always look this up. In fact, yeah, I was going to type it, but I've already just said done. So RAG ICC is where you can facilitate for the holding company to now become the corporate shareholder of the company, the subsidiary companies that you hold, that you can own in the UAE, whether it's free zone or mainland, as well as the fact that you can set up a holding company and have that holding company own subsidiaries outside of the UAE. So it's not just limited to just UAE subsidiaries, but you can own subsidiaries anywhere in the world. And that does distance the ownership because the directors who will be in the holding company books are kept confidential. This is stuff that is not put out for public information purposes. So all of this is confidential. The only thing that will be there is just the actual entity as the holding company, as corporate shareholding in these subsidiaries.
Okay, so just to add on the same question, so should the question refer to directorship or nominee directors or shareholders of the company as individuals? Okay, so in principle, it is now mandatory in the UAE to disclose the UBO of any entity, regardless, either it's a holding company or a non-holding company. Right. So there are certain service providers who provide you with this service for directorship services and nominee management. However, it depends on what kind of business activity that you're going to be undertaking. So you would find out that most service providers do not have appetite for nominee directorship on operating companies. Operating companies are active companies, trading companies, consulting companies, professional companies, etc. However, they may opt to provide you the nominee service without blaring the UBO when you're doing a passive business, which is a holding structure like what Alisa has just mentioned.
Mhm.
So yes, it is there. It's a facility that can be discussed, but there are conditions to it.
Thank you
We
so
move
much.
on to the next question. If I need to trade food and beverage, do I need to rent an office or a shop?
So the answer really depends on what part of the food and beverage you want to trade. So if you want to trade with food and beverage as a supplier directly to customers, then yes, you definitely would need to get a shop, or even you don't need to rent an office, but you definitely need a shop, right? You definitely need a shop. But then if you're going to be trading food and beverage and only be doing it with like B2B, like if you're bringing in, like let's say a signage of a lot of blueberries, and you're supplying a retailer, so you're basically wholesaling it to a retailer, then that's when you can either rent an office, this is up to you, or you can just utilize the shared desk options of the free zone. So you have a lot of options in which you need to do this. So there's no one way which is right. It really just depends on how you'd want to do it. So it's a yes and maybe.
Okay. The next question, will you be allowed, sorry, what reporting compliance is required? Are audited financial statements required to be prepared and or tax audits?
All right, so this now really depends, number one, on your transactions, as well as the frequency of these transactions. So we have a tax and accounting department which does this for all of our clients. They will be able to assist you to let you know if compliance is required or if you need to actually do some audited financials and tax audits, right? Now, in terms of tax auditing, definitely compliance is there. You definitely need to register to be tax compliant for sure. But when it comes to the reporting, it now really depends on the kind of transactions, where your transactions are being done, whether it's within the UAE or outside of the UAE. But our tax and accounting department can better explain this to you once you've explained to them exactly what it is you intend to do.
Okay, so just to add on to that as well, audit requirements are based on the jurisdiction in which you are registered. Like Alisa said, we have more than 52 free zones, and of those 52 free zones, 30 of them are in about 30 of them are in Dubai, and about 10 free zones require audited financial statements. We're talking like JAVSA, DMCC, Dubai Airport Free Zone, etc. So it's a question that depends on where have you been registered, which business activity are you undertaking, volume of transaction, of course, and also tax audits depending on the nature of the business. Is there any transfer pricing going to be involved? Are there any facilities that are going to be held? Also, it is mandatory to register for VAT if your estimated turnover is more than 375,000 dirhams. Similarly, it is mandatory, regardless of your income, to register for CIT, corporate income tax, as mentioned earlier.
Thank you
We
so
move
much.
on to the next question. Will you be allowed to open personal accounts if you have an entity, and are there limitations to the accounts?
Okay, so as long as you have an Emirates ID, so if you have like your visa and your residency here, you definitely can open up a personal account, right? So even if you have an entity or not, you can do it, right? Anyone with an Emirates ID can open up a personal account. So the only limitation to this is obviously you use it to receive things like your salary, to receive money from other people. You cannot do this for your business. So for your business, you definitely will need a corporate account. Yep.
Okay, we move on to the next question. What are the mainland setup costs as an estimate?
Right. So this really depends. Like there's no set cost for mainland. It really depends. Like I'll give you an example. Some people can get a mainland license for maybe even like 15,000 sometimes, right? They can get a mainland license for 15,000. Some people need to pay over 100,000 dirhams for a mainland license, mostly because it really depends on things like number one, the shareholdership, right? Who are the shareholders and how many are they? The memorandum of association also needs to make sure like that there's that. You have to pay for that. Some are done virtually, some need to actually be done there. The costs differ between those. Where you're setting up your mainland, we have mainland jurisdictions not just in Dubai. You have those in Abu Dhabi, those in other northern Emirates. So those can also vary. The visa costs that can vary. So generally, like they can cost from anywhere. But the one main thing that all of them have is what is known as the payment voucher. And that also is determined by a lot of factors. Number one, if your payment voucher requires you to have an external governmental body approve the activities that you're going to do, that cost is added into it. So for example, RERA, what I spoke about earlier, their cost is around 5,000 dirhams, somewhere there. So that cost is added to the government payment voucher. So the rough costs honestly really would honestly depend on what it is you want to do. So some certain government bodies are cheaper to get approvals for, like in terms of the costings, than others. Okay, so like let's say for instance you want to start a company that requires VARA, which is virtual assets, right? The amount that you need to pay for that would be a lot, right? So like for there's SIRA, there's RTA, there's a lot of governing authorities. So it, to be honest, I know like rough costs, it's really hard to say, but just honestly speaking, they vary, right? They vary. So you can have licenses, like I said, 15. 15 is not even the lowest, by the way. I've seen mainland licenses go for even less than 15,000 dirhams. So again, it really does vary. That's why I mentioned at the beginning that the costs are very flexible. They can change.
Thank you. The next question, what will be, okay. So the next question, what are the hidden costs or overlooked challenges foreign entrepreneurs face when setting up in Dubai?
Okay, so that was from Kudam Kono. There's another one from Tendai. I'll get to that one. I'll answer this one. So what are the hidden costs or overlooked challenges foreign entrepreneurs face when setting up in Dubai? Thank you for that. So a lot of people don't realize that there's certain things, and this is when you go with consultants that want to just make a quick buck out of you. Because honestly speaking, there are people like that here, right? There's a lot of people like that, people who just want to make sure that they either reach their quotas or make as much money as they can from that one sale. So you have to go with somebody that really knows their stuff. Hidden costs sometimes come through when people just simply don't explain to you things appropriately, especially when you ask questions. So I had an interesting conversation with somebody recently where they needed me to explain, for instance, the difference between an actual visa cost and a visa allocation cost. Because to a lot of people, those feel like the same thing, right? But then I had to break it down and explain that a visa allocation is just the quota that your license, your business license, is allowed to actually have visas under it. Whereas the visa itself is what you will put in your passport as well as have the Emirates ID. So because those two things are different cost factors in this, some people don't tell you that. Another one is when people don't tell you that there's going to be a separate payment voucher that you need to pay directly to the government, and they say that the license is probably, let's just say they may say it's 12,000 dirhams, but they don't mention to you that the government cost that you need to pay directly to them, because the license is just one part, right? There's also the approval from the government if you're going for a mainland license. Sometimes that payment voucher will come up to maybe even 20,000. So in your mind, if you're thinking that I'm only paying 12,000 dirhams for a license, and forgetting or not inquiring further to find out what exactly are the costs with government, you'll end up having a license that you can't use. Right. So those are the kind of things that challenges foreign entrepreneurs face when setting up in Dubai. And this is why we always suggest that you go with bona fide business consultants such as SETHUB, or go through entities like Zipco that will actually point you in the right direction. Because SetHub is just one of the many business setup companies that are under Zipco, right? So this is just to let you know that always make sure that you're also with somebody that is bona fide, right? And then Lloyd, I'll just answer the question. I think I probably skipped it on the chat, so I'll ask it on your behalf. So Tanay asked the question, what would be a top line recommendation for the registration of a marketing consultancy that serves global clients? This is a very good question. So marketing is one of the biggest industries in the UAE, mainly because, everyone, the success of your business here is marketing. That's just the top thing that I can say, right? The success of a lot of businesses here is their marketing strategy. So marketing is very much promoted by pretty much every jurisdiction, right? I'll give an example with a jurisdiction in one of the Northern Emirates called Fujairah, where they have a special recommendation for marketing consultancy activities, things like digital marketing, social media marketing management, and advertising promotions, etc. So the recommendation for doing this, I would say go with any jurisdiction that you'd go for. But I would say that if you want premium and you want like the best services, try go for the free zones located in Dubai. They will be expensive, right? But it's really something that you can do from pretty much any free zone. So what I would say, to serve global clients, you can do this from pretty much any free zone. You can even open a mainland if you'd like, right? But this would really depend on what it is you want to do. So for instance, if you're starting a marketing consultancy on the mainland, this is because you probably want governmental collaboration. So honestly, top line, I would really say just any reputable free zone. I would go with any in Dubai because Dubai is also the marketing capital of the UAE. So yeah, that's what I would say. Thank you.
Okay. So we go on to the next question. Yeah? When setting up a sports academy, will I need to register with the local sporting association before operating as an academy? If yes, do these sporting associations require an additional fee for registration?
All right. Okay. Lovely question from Ivan. So, yes, you definitely will need to register with the local sporting association. And the one in Dubai, for example, is known as the Dubai Sports Council, which is DSC. So, for this one client of mine, they were able to actually register this from a free zone. So, what they needed to do was get the license from the free zone, and it would have a remark on it that this license is currently inactive. So what they needed to do is approach and start their application with the Dubai Sports Council to get that remark removed, right? So there is a fee with them. I'm not sure, I don't remember how much the fee was. I last saw this a long time ago, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't terrible from the last I checked. But yeah, there definitely is an additional fee for the registration. I don't want to be caught lying here, but I think it was above 1,000 dirham. Yeah, I think it was above 1,000 dirham. I would need to double check on how much it is now because costs always change. But yes, you definitely need to register with the local sporting association, especially in Dubai. And yes, there is an additional fee.
Okay, just to add on that as well. So, Ivan, when you are registering a sporting academy, you need to have that application approved. What it will require you is for you to file with your initial approval if you're going for the mainland license or the free zone pre-approval if you're applying through a free zone. Also, there should be certificates, qualifying certificates. If it's soccer, there are FIFA accredited certificates that you need to submit. If it's tennis, something similar is there for you to submit. So your application as a trainer, as an accredited trainer, depends on your training level or your participation level. So it's something that you have to add on to your application after obtaining the initial approval certificate.
Exactly.
So you cannot go to apply for it today as an individual without the initial approval certificate issued by a DED or from the free zone. Attach your credentials as the main trainer, pay for the approval fee, then proceed with the next steps and complete as a normal entity.
Yeah, and also just to add to that, you yourself don't have to be the person who is accredited. You can hire somebody to do that, right? So
Right.
you can still own the business, but then you definitely need someone who is trained and skilled to run the and have the qualifications to do this. So this is just to let you know that even if you're not, for instance, a black belt in karate, you still need to hire a black belt in karate to be under this license. Yeah.
Correct. Can you get a free zone license, then transition to mainland, or would it require a new application?
So, rules for this have varied, but what I would say is it really depends on what it is you want to do. You can expand into the mainland with the new license, or you can get what is known as a non-objective certificate. But then again, not a lot of free zones give NOCs, that's what they're called, to operate in the mainland, right? So, what I would suggest is that if you do get a free zone license, get it for the purpose of whatever it is that you want to do. Maybe sometimes it's just for the visa purposes, and then separate that with a separate mainland license. I would advise that would be the best way to do it. Like just basically have the two subsidiaries there and just have that maybe like as a branch or whatever it is. And then the best case scenario is where you have these two subsidiaries and have the holding company at the top own these subsidiaries, and then everything is there. So it really depends also why you need to transition into the mainland, because sometimes transitioning into the mainland may not even be necessary. So it really just depends on how you also want to scale up your business and if transitioning into the mainland is necessary. But depending on which free zone you also register with, they may or may not be able to give you that NOC. NOC is a non-objection certificate to expand into the mainland.
Okay, so to add on to that, the last statement refers to having a dual license by obtaining a non-objective certificate from the Free Zone Authority where you have initially registered to operate on mainland. What might this entail is that you are going to have two licenses in which you are going to pay a permit to the mainland authorities for operating your business and maintaining the parent license within the free zone.
Mhm.
So this is common with the maiden license, like Alissa mentioned. If we are looking at it from a re-domiciliation perspective, whereby you are moving the whole entity to mainland, it is available in certain particular free zones, DMCC, for example. However, it depends on the nature of activity. If it is available on mainland and if you are meeting the conditions that the mainland authorities would give, then you can transition. The difficult that you will face in that is on the human resource mobility, meaning visas for employees or managers under the free zone company cannot be transitioned into mainland. Why? Because of the immigration or the residence regulations between the free zone and the mainland. However, they are the same, but there will be a change of authority if you're moving from a free zone to mainland. So you have to keep that into perspective that it's not only the permit, you may also need to look at how you are going to mobilize the human resource from the free zone entity onto the mainland company for onboarding.
Exactly.
Moving on, I think we have two more questions left. Do you offer market research or set up services for new businesses? I can do research remotely, but it may differ from someone who is in the local. And
There's actually quite a
yeah,
few. Okay, so offer market research. So to an extent, yes, we can do it. But obviously this would really depend on your needs for the market research you need to get. So we can do that. We have a separate marketing department as well that can do the research on your behalf. And there are companies that can do that for you here as well. Right. So we do offer it, but this is something that you can definitely do. Sometimes the best thing to do would probably visit the UAE. Like this place is still a tourist hub as well. So most people also get a bit of a better understanding of the UAE when they actually visit it, especially Dubai, to actually see and feel the success of their business that way. So definitely market research can definitely be done for that. Set up services for the new businesses, yes, we do that for sure. So yeah, it really depends. I mean, our companies are local in the UAE, so yeah, we can definitely do that for you. Yeah, I think there's some more there as well.
okay. So next question, do you have data that shows how different sectors are performing in the UAE?
Yes, we do. We can avail this data much later, probably after, or like you can email me. Let me actually put my email address in the chat right now. It really depends on what it is that you'd want to do. So let me see. No, this is just to the panelists. Let me put to everyone. SETHUB.ae. So that's my email address. You can always shoot me an email there and we can share to you what data we have. So obviously some of this is confidential information. So there's not all the data that we can give, but yes, we definitely do have that data.
Okay. On the same note, we can also refer you to the Dubai Chamber website. It's dubaichamber.gov.ae. It's open data that's published there over a number of years. ZIPCO is also a member and under the patronage of Dubai Chamber. There is also Dubai Economy and Tourism Department. If you go to their website, they will give you quick data. Mostly it's focusing on Dubai and information that has been collected through various sources, credible, of course. And you can also visit Ministry of Economy, UAE. You can also go to FTA, Federal Tax Authority. These will give you information at a macro level. A sector specific, there is information that is provided by service providers, like what Allistar said, that if it's a sector specific information that you require, you can email to him with the specific need. But in a general view, Minister of Economy, UAE, Dubai Chamber, Dubai Economy and Tourism, Federal Tax Authority. These five will give you information at a macro level.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I think yeah, we have to end this very soon. I think we've gone over
Yeah.
time. But I do see some quick question here from Preacher, which says, what's included in the 6,000 starter pack and what are the annual fees for maintaining this particular package? So generally, this is, for instance, just the license. Okay, so this is just for you to get the license, and this is mainly for people who already have visas in the UAE. So this is in a free zone. Like let's say you're wanting to run an online store, like just basic e-commerce. So you have that license and you get that as well as a lease agreement with the free zone so that you can have the free zone be your business address. All right. So that's essentially what's in the starter pack. And the annual fees for this usually are the same price of the actual license. So just keep in mind that if you paid for the license for this year at 6,000, you're likely going to pay for it either at that amount or slightly more adjusted for inflation. So just so you know that it's most times it's never going to be below the amounts that you already bought the license for, right? That's because it's essentially kind of like buying another license, and it depends on the validity of your license. So for instance, a year-on-year license can get more expensive over time, whereas someone who opts in for a multi-year license can take advantage of the renewal fee discounts. So it really just depends. You'd have to have the conversation with me, of course, or Lloyd through Zipco if you'd like. But other than that, yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Lloyd, if it's okay, I think we're good.
Okay, sure. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Overall, we have addressed about 14 questions. So it shows that almost 50% of our attendees have had an opportunity to ask a question, and we hope that we have been answered or partly answered. Anyway, we will conclude this night's session here. And any afterthoughts, any questions further, you can reach out to Allistar on the email he gave on this chat box, or refer them to the Zipco leadership, and we can take it further. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will end the chat. There was a question briefly. Can I get a license whilst I'm under employment visa? Yes, it always depends. That's all I'll say for now. Yes, you can. So thank you so much, Lloyd. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening. Thank you so much. There's my last slide. All right, I will end.